We might get started. Good afternoon to you all. My name is Lucy. I'm a project manager at the Services Commission. But mostly I'm involved with service codes and the evaluation of customer engagement. So it's with pleasure that I acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands that we're meeting on today. So for me, I'm speaking from the lands within the Kulin Nation, and I pay my respects to all elders past, present and emerging. I welcome everyone who's joined us here today. From the Commission, we have our Chair, Kate Simons. We have Rebecca Billings, Satish Biani and Simon Corden. We're joined also by the Director of Price Monitoring and Regulation, Marcus Crudden, and various staff from across the water team. From the water businesses, we have representatives from across business planning, regulation, operations and customer support. Representing the social impact sector, we've got representatives from VCOS, St Vincent's de Paul, Child and Family Services Ballarat and Financial Counselling Victoria. Thank you to those who've joined us from industry associations from the water sector. We've got representatives from Water Services Association of Australia and Vic Water, as well as the Council of Small Business of Australia. Also present today are representatives from EWOV and from across DELC. So we're recording today's session, and as a default, we've moved most of you to mute. Our technical facilitator, Christina Abella, is on hand if you've got any technical queries. We'll also be monitoring the water inbox if you need to reach out to us through a different channel. I ask that you update your names and include your organisation identifier. Christina will put some instructions in the chat function if you're not sure how to do this. I think we're all becoming very capable with Zoom these days. Most of today's session will be best served with the use of speaker view, although during question time you may wish to revert to gallery view to see who's asking the question. So on to the purpose of bringing us all together today. Today's session will be covering the following. So we'll be looking at our decision to adopt coronavirus support measures into our water customer service codes. We'll be looking at observations of the changing nature of consumer vulnerability through the coronavirus pandemic. We'll be looking at an overview of our work program, including our decision to amend the codes at this time, how we can best support the development of better practice approaches to customer support, and changes to our monitoring and reporting program. We'll also be seeking your feedback on how we resume our consultation on the broader reform of our codes. So from here, it's my pleasure to introduce our Commission Chairperson, Kate Simons. Commissioner Simons has held the role of Commissioner since October 2016 and was appointed as Chairperson nearly a year ago. In a former role, she acted as Solicitor Assisting for the HIH Insurance Royal Commission. She's held roles within the university sector and at the Federal Court of Australia. And these days, her main side hustle is instructing long division and fractions. Welcome, Kate.
Thanks very much for that introduction, Lucy. And yes, that's absolutely correct. With children at home, school-aged children, that's happening on the side, as I know that's probably happening for many of you on the screen today. Nice to see a few familiar faces and many I don't know, so it's great to make an introduction. So I'd like to start by welcoming you all to today's forum, and thank you for making the time to attend. It's certainly a challenging time we're living in at the moment, and it's important to acknowledge the impact it's having on every one of us. We're facing a new and uncertain environment due to the coronavirus pandemic, but we are also seeing great examples of connection, collaboration and innovation. And we've always worked alongside the water sector in long-term interests of Victorians, continue to do so at this very time. Lucy, today we're announcing that the policy approach and principles agreed to by National Cabinet on the 9th of April are being enshrined in our water customer service codes. And while new to our codes, we note that in late May, all businesses attested to meeting those national principles, which is very positive. The coronavirus pandemic continues to have a significant impact across the Victorian community, and many people have seen an upheaval of their lives, their livelihoods, and changes to businesses, work and care arrangements across the state. We know this is having an impact on the ability of customers to pay their water bills. We expect those customers who can pay their bills should go on doing so. This helps customers avoid the accumulation of arrears to unmanageable levels, which we want to avoid. But there are customers who will need additional support, or in some cases will need support for the very first time. And we know that many businesses are assisting customers and reaching out early to encourage them to seek support. This is great to see and consistent with the spirit of the national principles. We also note the impact of the pandemic on water businesses and your staff, and will continue to engage with businesses on the longer term effects, including through our upcoming workshops, which Lucy will talk about more later. The Commission decided to align the customer service codes with the national principles to clearly set out our expectations. These changes will place formal obligations on water businesses to act in a way that is consistent with the national principles, and many of the principles are consistent with consumer protections in the existing codes, but there are some that afford additional protections. And we have engaged with the Department of Land, Water and Planning throughout this process to ensure our approach and understanding of the environment is consistent. We recognise that some of the national principles were designed to be temporary. Accordingly, we will intend to continue to engage with you, our stakeholders, to inform our thinking as we review how long to retain the full set of national principles in the code. So we look forward to engaging with you as needs evolve. We accept that we're all in this for the long haul and that there will be effects that are not yet apparent. So we will continue to work with you and the sector through the recovery phase as well. So as I was saying, I think I might have got to the point where I said we will continue to work through the recovery phase with the sector, and intend to also convene a roundtable meeting with water business managing directors in the coming months. So aligning our customer service codes with the national principles will build consumer awareness of the supports that are available to them, and we hope it will clarify our expectations and create consistency for you in terms of the advice from us and the Victorian and Australian governments. The new provisions extend support to small businesses and our expectations in halting debt recovery. We're mindful that the national principles set out eligibility for support based on criteria for the job seeker and JobKeeper support payments. And Marcus will talk a little later today in the forum about the definition of small business and what that means going forward. We've also heard from some of you about areas you are navigating in relation to staff out in the field, for example, those reading water meters. And you know, as I said, this is also about you, your businesses, and how you're caring for your staff. And absolutely our expectation is that you're observing safe practices that are consistent with government advice about essential workers and safe distancing. So thank you for doing that. While we're introducing new provisions to align with the national principles, we also want to be clear that existing customer service code provisions still apply. We are very mindful of, unfortunately, the reported increase in family violence incidents through the coronavirus pandemic and the impact this is having on your customers. The shared commitment we all first made to supporting customers affected by family violence several years ago has never been more important. And our expectation for you to meet your obligations relating to family violence in the customer service codes has not changed. Our response to the coronavirus pandemic has highlighted the changing nature of consumer vulnerability in the Victorian community. This is our first roundtable with the water sector. It's great to see everybody here, and we look forward to some enlightening and productive discussion today. We've also been holding roundtables with the energy sector to understand the emerging trends and challenges from their perspective. And we've heard, firstly, there's been an increase in customers requesting payment assistance, with many choosing to defer their bills. Secondly, retailers are concerned that customers will experience greater payment difficulty when the job seeker and JobKeeper payments end or decrease, and that small businesses are accumulating energy debt and may have significant arrears by the end of the year. In April, we heard a cross-sector workshop also to discuss the emerging increase in family violence incidents, and it was great to see representatives from your businesses there, along with many energy retailers and family violence experts. We heard that while new forms of family violence are emerging, for example, using coronavirus as an excuse to prevent someone leaving a relationship, the dynamics are the same, and family violence services are seeing more people reach out for help. We've also been holding roundtables with community and consumer advocacy organisations to understand the impact of the evolving environment on consumers, and some of those representatives I can see here today as well, so thank you for being here. This has been an important mechanism to understand what's happening on the ground for some of the most vulnerable members of our community, and some of the things we've heard. A lack of consumer awareness of their entitlement to support is placing their welfare at risk. Some consumers are making difficult choices to meet essential household expenses without realising that help is out there and available. There's a challenge for people from non-English speaking backgrounds or people with diverse communications needs. And people who are experiencing vulnerability for the first time are also less aware of the support available or how to navigate the support system. We see early intervention and proactive communications as potentially very useful for people in these circumstances. Community organisations are also concerned about consumers getting through to support lines, and they also reported case studies of businesses pressuring customers to pay more than they could afford, initiating debt collection or sending restriction or disconnection warnings. It's expected there will also be an influx of support requests as restrictions on movement ease and government support is reduced or withdrawn. Support services are currently seeing a decrease in calls but are preparing for an increase. Inclusive communication that prioritises the communication needs and unique circumstances of consumers will obviously be critical for an effective recovery. As you may have seen, we've also released a new guide designed to ensure customers with a cognitive disability receive information in an accessible and effective way. And this is an exciting piece of work we developed with the Melbourne Social Equity Institute, and one that shows our commitment to encouraging better practice and working in collaboration to support consumers experiencing vulnerability. As you're aware, the Commission's overarching legislative objective is to promote the long-term interests of all Victorian consumers, and we have an enduring commitment to develop reforms to support consumers experiencing vulnerability. We believe that the coronavirus pandemic and the uncertain economic environment has created an important opportunity to further reflect on our role and what we would like it to look like going forward. Can I invite you and your organisations to join us in continuing to challenge our collective thinking about inclusive customer support and what role we can each play in our communities over time. I will leave it to Marcus, who will be presenting shortly, to provide more detail about the alignment of the codes with the national principles. And Marcus will also be talking a bit more about the data we've been collecting from water businesses. And on that note, I'd just like to acknowledge the efforts of water businesses to provide that data and engage with our staff. That information is invaluable for the Commission to have an understanding of the effect on your customers and how your businesses are assisting your customers, so that we have real visibility of what's happening on the ground. So I know all that takes time and everybody's busy, so I certainly appreciate your efforts to engage with us. Thanks again for being here today. I'm looking forward to a productive discussion ahead, and as I said, Marcus will be providing a bit more detail about the alignment of the codes with the national principles. But on that note, I think we're moving on to the next part of the agenda. So thanks very much, Lucy.
Thank you, Kate. And I know we've talked about opportunity for you to answer some questions as well. So before we do that, I do ask anyone if you've got any comments or questions for Kate on anything she's mentioned. I've added to the chat function the guidelines for accessible communication, but I reflect there might also be your own reflections on inclusive customer support and some of the things that you're seeing from customers and the engagement work that you've all been doing. So can you please add any comments in the chat function and or any reflections that you'd like to share with Kate?
Maybe while I wait for any comments or reflections, Lucy, just a general reflection for myself, and I'm joined by my fellow commissioners around the virtual roundtable today. But from my perspective, holding the roundtables we've talked about with the energy and the community sector has been a really invaluable opportunity to make sure that we understand exactly what's happening for businesses and what your concerns are, as well as what assistance is being given to consumers and what their experience is at the moment. So This is a great opportunity just to hear directly from water businesses through the forum today. And of course, if my fellow commissioners have anything they'd like to add, they're around the table as well. But just wondering if any reflections or comments have come in, Lucy.
No, it's pretty quiet here. So we'll certainly be, Kate's going to stay with us, so there'll certainly be an opportunity to direct anything to Kate further on, or if we think that, Kate, we think you're best placed to respond to anything that comes up later on, we'll just call on you at that time.
Thanks, Lucy.
Next, we're going to hear from Marcus Crudden. Marcus has been leading the water team for many years now and has, in recent times, in the last 2 years, has become the director of a broader division encompassing all price monitoring and regulation. So Marcus has been the driver for much of the policy work that's been undertaken over many years within the water division, particularly Primo, and is obviously very involved in the development and strengthening of the codes. So Marcus, I'll pass to you for an overview of our work program.
Thanks, Lucy, and welcome everyone for attending today. And like Lucy and Kate, I'd like to pay my respects to the lands of the traditional owners on which we're meeting today, and for those that may be here with us this afternoon. This afternoon, I'd just like to give a bit of an overview of the work program, some details around the code amendments, and speak a bit about the data monitoring and reporting we've been undertaking. So in terms of the work program, many of you will be aware that we've changed a number of aspects of the program due to coronavirus and the impact on the sector, and reprioritising your work and our work. This has included issues such as postponing this year's regulatory audit program. Probably as we speak, in the normal course of a year, you may be preparing for an interview with an auditor around this August-September period. So we removed that obligation this year so that you could focus your attention on customers rather than our regulatory processes. We're pushing back our regulatory accounting work by several months to allow extra time for people to undertake that work. We're also pushed back our customer code reform work, perhaps somewhat disappointing in that we've done quite a lot of work on that, and we're probably about ready to come out with a draft reformed code almost as we went in the first round of lockdown. So this is something we are keen to restart, but not restart until we're in a better workplace environment, and we'll discuss the timing of that later today. We have also just released some further guidance to Melbourne Water to ensure the effects of coronavirus are reflected in its price submission due to us later this year. We've also extended the timelines for submissions to that. We've also written to all businesses reminding you if there are obligations you can't meet or are unable to meet because of the changed work environment and the necessity to adjust practices, that you should write to us and inform us if any of those things occur, and we'll take that into account in our performance reporting and in assessing any compliance with codes or other regulatory instruments. In terms of the work program, where there have been some extra obligations placed on the industry, we've introduced weekly reporting. This reporting is also shared with DELP and the Treasury. So it is informing our needs, as Kate mentioned, it informs the Commission needs, but is helping and assisting other areas of government also understand what is going on within the water sector. We also introduced qualitative reporting, and a number of you here today would have been phoned by Lucy and her team. So we've been interviewing businesses around the context of the data you're monitoring, the actions you've taken in response to the pandemic, how you're assisting customers, and we'll shortly do a third round of those interviews. So there was one in the initial stage of the pandemic, there was around late June or so, and we'll now start a third round of interviews with your staff and some of you, just understanding what is happening on the ground and the information that's not picked up through quantitative numbers. Again, this information has been useful in assisting us, but also in us communicating to other areas of government what the sector is doing. And I assure you, we're also doing this type of reporting and monitoring in other sectors such as energy. So it's not something unique or an additional burden on water. It's something that is being used across a range of sectors. Now, importantly, today, we released amendments to our customer service code to incorporate the national pricing principle, the national principles into the code. In our view, including the national principles in the code is the most pragmatic way to align government policy and the regulatory framework. As you're all aware, since late May, you've provided attestations to government that you are compliant with the principles and enforcing them. And most of these principles are generally reflected within the codes anyway, but may require some changes. Today's amendments follow recent amendments to our energy codes, where again similar measures were taken to give effect to the national principles for customers of energy retailers. The finding of our June interviews were that all water corporations have put in place systems and processes to support the national principles. At the same time, though, these principles may not be well known to consumers and may not be readily accessible to some of those struggling to pay their bills or affected by the coronavirus pandemic. We consider that the codes already provide effective support that is aligned to many of the intentions in the national principles, and I think, as most of you would be aware, water in Victoria has often been acknowledged as leading responses around consumer vulnerability, financial hardship and family violence, and we want to continue this leadership position. We do have a note there are gaps that the virus brings about and the response to it that are not readily covered by the codes in its normal day-to-day operation. Some of these deal with the suspension of credit collection practices, the application of hardship policies to small businesses, and the activities of field staff where they may be interacting in the community, such as taking meter reading or undertaking repairs, where there's increased community concern about the potential for spread of virus that's not normally there in better times when businesses go about their work. Some of these issues, as I noted, are lesser time, but we're observing a variation in practice between businesses as we've conducted interviews. I myself received a reminder notice from my water business about an unpaid bill that probably in the first paragraph would have had about 6 things that would have been breaches of the national principles if any of them were carried out. So it really is important in signing up, and these now being in the code, that businesses are reflecting on all your communications and interactions with customers, that there is not old messaging that may have been fine in normal times but are being sent out to customers at a point of concern or heightened anxiety in the community. We've also, in our interview, perhaps one thing we didn't see were specific flags around eligibility criteria of customers of small businesses, where job seeker and job keeper are very much within the definitions of the national principles. So a reminder to all water business out there where customers may be receiving job seeker or job keeper, that of itself may be a significant flag as towards a customer needing or being eligible for assistance. We have seen significant variations in how small businesses were defined between various businesses. So it really is important that you keep in mind that JobKeeper flag when assessing whether a business may or may not be eligible under the national principles. In summary, we consider adopting principles into the code aligns the policy and regulatory clarity for the water sector. It supports consumer awareness. It fills some gaps within the existing codes and regulatory frameworks. It does provide a sound basis for potential monitoring of responses, but also does provide for potential redress through the Energy and Water Ombudsman Scheme, if customers believe they're eligible for assistance but have been denied assistance, then it'll be formally recognised in the code. We're also intending to do this, that as Kate said, we're intending this to be a cooperative process between ourselves and the industry. It's not a we'll get you or we're coming out for you. What we intend to do in the coming months is work to develop better practices approaches. Many of you will be familiar that we run similar workshops during the development of Primo and the customer service code. We tend to run similar things over the next couple of months to really work with industry on identifying best practice and best programs that are being undertaken to assist customers. We also will interact with the other sectors we regulate where they also are doing similar programs. Importantly, we'll continue to review the need for retaining the principles within the code. We've committed in the paper that went out today that we'll do a review by the end of the year to see whether there's still a need. We'll be tied in with the alignments of when the federal support programs will or won't continue from. That I think there was significant concern even when we first embarked on changing the codes that federal assistance would end around now. That's been extended through to the end of the year and the codes will be in place at least till then. I've also got a longer term code reform that many of the principles build on similar issues that we were considering during the code. There was discussions around extending support to small business during that work, as well as a significant focus on the proactive communication. And the release of the Easy English Guides was work that was originally undertaken as part of that code reform, but we've pushed out, given the current circumstances, it seems material that was quite helpful in assisting you and assisting customers. There are other elements of the national principles we will be interested in exploring how they work in the current environment and whether they're suitable for longer term application, and Lucy will talk a bit about this later this afternoon. To give a brief overview of our monitoring program, we've been, as many of you are aware, and many of you have been participating, we've been collecting weekly data since late April. So far, we've seen that there have been no new supply restrictions since that reporting commenced. The number of customers on hardship programs has increased by over 2,000, so it's sitting at about 22,000 overall. We've seen a steady increase in applications for utility relief grants. They've gone from around 100 a week to, I think the latest week was about over 400 a week, so there's been significant increases. The timeframes of processing utility relief grants have been an issue raised with us repeatedly during the forums with the community sector. So while we are aware they're a very useful measure, we're also cognizant that there have been significant delays in processing some of those grant applications as well. One interesting thing is that we've seen the level of customers on instalment plans is actually generally consistent with what it's been on average over the last 4 years. We're not sure why instalment plans are not being taken up more in the current environment. Many of you will be aware that there are still some customers on restrictions, noting it's nearly 4 months since the pandemic and those were removed. So there still remains about 130 customers that have been on restrictions for quite some time. We would really be urging businesses that still have customers that have been restricted for this length of period to really be checking that those restrictions are appropriate. We have 9 businesses that have no restrictions at all in place. So for those 9 that do still have people remaining on restrictions, it is important that you are monitoring that situation and that those customers are returned to supply if suitable. Uh, we've also heard from some businesses reporting increases in 90-day debts, but at the same time, we're not hearing increases in call volumes. So again, it's probably important that this proactive communication is getting out there to customers and getting customers that may be experiencing payment difficulties into your own or the government's assistance program and channels. And lastly, I'd just like to talk about some changes in our monitoring and reporting. We've been reporting publicly in the energy sector for some months. We think it's now time to put in place some public reporting on high-level outcomes of the water sector. The data so far we've collected, we've treated as confidential and so been shared amongst ourselves, DELWP and Treasury, but we think we are moving to a point in time where there should be some public disclosure of the information that has been coming out and highlighting some of the trends. As I just went through there, most of the information that has so far been collected is actually quite positive and shows a very favourable response by the water sector. There is some variation between individual businesses, but overall we acknowledge the sector has made significant efforts to work with and assist customers and community affected by the pandemic, and our expectations remain high that this will continue through the coming months. And we are very keen to continue to work with yourselves and make sure the codes, the monitoring, the reporting all align with a better understanding of what is occurring out there. So with that, I'd like to open up for any questions. I think a few have been popping up. So
We do indeed.
going to feed them around, Lucy?
Yeah, we'll do, and do indeed have some questions in the chat here. So I've also placed a link to the National Cabinet Agreed Principles that you'll need to scroll up now to capture that, but if that would be helpful for people at the moment. Vicky, I will start off with you. You got in nice and early. Marcus is just reflecting on the performance, changes in the performance reporting this year. Vicky, are you able to unmute yourself and just to identify where you're calling from? And we'll start off with your comment.
So yeah, I was just commenting on, just asking whether there was any associated fee with the desktop review for the performance reporting. Normally we would have an external auditor on site. That's obviously not happening this year under the current process, and I was just checking in to see whether we would expect to see an increase in perhaps our ESC fee this year to accommodate that. But Chris has since gone back to me and said that there is no extra fee for that this year. So I think that's a good news story to spread across the business and across the industry. And I'm from Western Water. Sorry, I forgot to recognise that.
No, that's okay, Vicky. There will be no audit, so there will be a cost saving to businesses there. But what we were more conscious of was probably the time saving that the audit programs can require interviews with quite a lot of staff, and in the work from home environment, but also in the need of, we don't want to be interfering with frontline response programs. Bad news is, and you probably all got it, that your regulatory actually you won't ever get, but your regulatory license fees are up a bit, but that's probably more reflective of this year. There was a number of things such as price reviews, one of which you were the recipient of, Vicky.
Thanks for that, Marcus. There's been a couple of queries just around that detail of some of the things that you've covered off today. Eve, you were just mentioning just a little bit more detail around some of the data, the numbers that you've seen today, both in the media release and Marcus has talked about. Are you able just to talk to that around what would be helpful for you at this time?
Yeah, I'm just, sorry, Lucy, I'm interested in sort of seeing, I guess, a bit more detail on what particular customer support measures have been accessed and the increases in those. Are you collecting data on that as well?
Lucy, do you have any information on what data we have on some of those things?
I guess I sort of understood that that we'll be moving to making public some of the data generally, Eve. At the moment, we've used some of the highlights in the media release, but we'll be just working with the sector just as we move to making that more publicly available to you. But my understanding is that we're not doing that at this point in time, but we're moving to that over the coming month. Marcus, Eve, have I captured that correctly? Or
yeah, I'm probably not so interested in a breakdown by water utility, but more on the actual support mechanisms. So government funding and how many extensions to payment dates or payment plans, that kind of thing.
Okay, so yeah, we can definitely share with you the type of data that we have been collecting. So it's around the instalment plan, numbers of instalment plans, numbers on hardship programs, number of utility relief grants, and Dean, sorry, it's just escaping me at the moment. What are some of the other items?
That's a subset, though, Eve, of what we would normally collect on an annual basis. We haven't sought to introduce new measures. I know at times people said, why don't you collect this? But we've tried to avoid having to get businesses to put in new IT queries and changing things significantly from what would normally be collected and coming to us. It's just we're getting a small subset of data on a fairly frequent basis that perhaps gives some more real-time understanding for us. And indeed, the pleasant thing is on some of the indicators like numbers of restrictions, it's 0 for all businesses. So very happy that those things are low or at 0.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Yeah, so for those who aren't involved in the providing of data, Dean, are you able to step through the particular items that we've been collecting since April?
Sure, Lucy. And thanks to the water business for doing this. It's been great. Just to give you an overview of what we're collecting at the moment, we're collecting the number of water restrictions that are in place. That has gone down since late April quite a bit. The number of customers that are in hardship programs at the end of each week. The number of utility relief grants that are applied for during the week, and that's had a pretty large step up over the last few months. Customers receiving hardship grants during the week from the water businesses, and the number of payment instalment plans in place at the end of the week. I noticed there's a couple of comments around call waiting times, call volumes, and extensions. We'll have a bit of a think about the data we're collecting and how they overlay with our interview programs. We're finding those interviews are actually really useful in providing some context that may not necessarily be best captured through a survey, but more to come on that one. Thanks, Lucy.
Great. I also wanted, Marcus, I was just wondering, there's some a couple of other queries just relating to some of these areas. So one of the queries that's come through from Hannah, and then I'll pass to you, Gavin, shortly, just around some of the other items that you've referred to. But Marcus, Hannah's got a query around, I guess, the impact of, the impact of on customers on the flow-on effects from aged debt. So Hannah, I'll pass to you for a bit more detail about that. And you'll need to take yourself off mute.
Thanks, Lucy. I was just concerned about all of us in the water industry ending up needing to pass on increased prices due to carrying so much aged debt. And I don't think we've seen the worst of it. I think that's still yet to come. So I just wonder how the ESC are feeling about the future and what this could mean for customers, and not knowingly putting a customer in a worse off position than what they might be today.
Thanks, Hannah. It's a good question. Now, I'm not particularly worried as a person that's responsible for price reviews. The level of debt, and even a couple where there's changes of debt on water businesses compared to other businesses who are very low, even with rising debts, their rises on very low basis. It would require significant changes to actually have any impact on price. There's already allowances for bad debt built into current prices, and most businesses operate well below those. It's also not clear to the extent that some of these won't be recovered in time, and that's why, I would be urging that businesses, do make proactive communications with customers and get on top of these before debts accelerate to levels I think past experience in these things is early intervention allows debts to be at levels where people can pay. Something that has come up in some of our other forums is some of the lower income earners that may be having payment in difficult times may actually have a higher level of income in the current environment than what they normally would, so have continued to pay and are making payments. So yes, I appreciate there is some increase in debt out there, but it's not at levels that is anything going to be material in a pricing sense.
Okay, thanks.
And Marcus, could you just reflect on some of the comments that Gavin's raised? Obviously, there's the potential within the water sector to create a lien on a property, and I know this was an issue that was raised at the Community Sector Roundtable as well. Are you able to share, I guess, your reflections on those comments as well?
Yes,
Gavin? Sorry, Gavin, did you want to, just give you an opportunity to just clarify or add anything to that comment that you
No, thanks, Lucy. I worked out the penalty interest rates myself. Thanks for that. Yeah, just more about the liens, Marcus, now and into the future. I know some people might like that option. I don't think it's a good one, but some people might, older people in particular. So just wondering where liens fit within the framework in the moment and into the future.
Look, it's probably quite as much for the sector as me that I guess liens are legally available to businesses and normally applied at the point of sale. I think what you may be referring to as practices that might have existed 20 years ago were often things like pensioners that may not be paying were suggested, I don't pay, and this could come out of a deceased estate or something in the future. And 10 or 20 years of non-payment with interest rates then that were 15 to 17% become enormous amounts and were well above what originally had been paid. I haven't come across any significant issues with liens in a long time. I don't think people are probably using them in a sense that they may have once been used. I'm happy if anyone in the water sector wants to comment. The interest rates now are 4% on debts, not the old 15 and 10% penalty rates. So they don't accumulate very much. But as far as I'm aware, broad use, but it may even encourage actually a slight bit of support because there is some protection for water businesses that, say, energy utilities don't have.
I'm reflecting back on I've been around that long, since the last recession, where liens, not only in water authorities, but local governments got quite big. It became a thing. I'm just raising it. It's not picked up in the national guidelines. That's all, just raising.
Look, it certainly was an issue when we first got involved in economic regulation. There were customers that had enormous debts, and I'm talking tens and 20,000s. The interest rates when I first got involved in that type of issue, Gavin, was 17.5%. So it didn't take a few years of non-payment led to very large debts. We also had, I think, pretty well fully fixed property-based charges back in the last recession again, which often meant many pensioners, particularly in areas like inner city, often had quite large bills and very limited capacity to pay. So I think the sector has changed a lot, and a lot of those practices also predates economic regulation and certainly most of the current approaches to credit and debt management. And I'm happy if someone from the sector may want to comment about use of liens or...
Is there anyone who'd like to make a comment there? Happy to move to the next question then. Claire, you spoke about the updating our customer charters. Marcus, Claire, are you able to just reflect on that? And you might need to take yourself off mute for that.
Sure. Thanks, Lucy. I really just wanted to know if the ESC are going to require...
Can't hear you.
Yep, sorry, I had my mic. Just wanted to know if the ESC required water authorities to update our customer charters based on the amended customer code, or you don't need us to do any type of formal amendment?
I don't think you need to do any formal amendment. I think, as we noted, the vast majority of things required under the national principles probably are already covered anyway. It mightn't hurt, though, somewhere on website or communication materials, you noted the principles to apply, but I don't think we're wanting you to go to the admin time or cost to actually update or send out charters. You'll see our code will simply put in the national principles as a schedule. We'll be quite happy if you did electronic links to those. The main difference is really within that small business community, and whether you may want to, but I also know a lot of you have already extended support to small business, but whether you may want to just update some of your communications to small business about that the principles apply. But I guess we're more interested in what you're doing in practice rather than having an amended charter.
So I don't know if you can hear my son in the background, so I apologise.
I think the other thing, Claire, was that these will be time bound, as we noted that we will undertake a review by the end of the year. So I don't think we want you to update charters and then in 4 or 5 months have to update them again. I don't think the cost or the admin burden's warranted.
Great. Thanks, Marcus.
Okay, so I think we've picked up now on all the comments that have been made, but I am interested in certainly in the reflections that you've had around your own discussions and engagement with customers, with your community sector that's operating in your local areas, or others who've joined the forum who are less familiar with the water sector. If there are any questions that we can assist you with to help sort of navigate some of the things that we've spoken about.
I see also Lucy just saying, has made a comment that she thinks why instalments may not be up, maybe because of use of longer payment extensions. I'm not sure, Jess, whether you want to comment on that, or are there other water businesses that may want to comment? Are you using more extensions rather than formal payment plans?
Just anecdotally, we've had a lot more. When I'm talking to the customer call centre staff, there's been a lot more options for the longer payment extensions rather than a payment plan. I think that's probably just people's preferred option at the moment, to be like, well, we'll give you 12 weeks, that's 3 months, see what happens then. The problem that will come out probably from the longer payment extensions is by the time that payment extension ends, the new bill gets issued, so it kind of means that they end up moving probably to an instalment plan or alternative option later down the track. So we might actually see a movement of more customers coming into instalment plans like hardship grants later down the path.
Okay. Yeah, that's good to know. You know, certainly we were mindful when we embarked on the weekly reporting that we wanted to pick up a subset of the performance reporting details, because that was a familiar metric, and for businesses, even if it was done on a more routine basis. What our interviews did show us was that extensions were becoming quite popular as an option. So we do see that as being, we're hearing that that's a broader tool that people are using, but yeah, to the extent that we're going to start collecting on that, we really want to engage with you guys, because if it's a useful metric, we should be, but at the same time, you know, we're mindful of the amount of, you know, of putting on sort of particular obligations at the time when other ones might suffice. So that's part of an ongoing discussion that we'll be having over time, just around the value of where we can sort of add value with the monitoring reporting that we're doing. Marcus, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I'd just say a few more comments are coming in from a couple of businesses on that. Certainly be welcome and feedback, and if you think it is something that perhaps we should add to our monitoring to collect data on payment extensions as well as instalments, that could be an improvement we could think about doing.
Yeah, cool. That's really good to see. Thanks. Yeah, so other comments? Obviously, we've mentioned in the chat, Dean added a note around additional guidance to Melbourne Water relating to coronavirus. Will be on our website shortly. So we put a link up there. So if anyone who has some any sort of in that sphere of influence, that's something that you can be up to date about. Another questions? Marcus, we may then, I guess we're in an opportunity for me to go on and talk a little bit around the longer term reform of the code that we put on hold. Before I do, there will certainly be an opportunity to ask some further questions later, but please keep the chat function going if things are occurring to you, across the passage of time, and we can come back to any questions for Marcus, and certainly for Kate and the other commissioners. You can keep using that chat function as well for those. Hannah, just see it's good. Been made. Okay, so that's sort of looking at, Hannah, can you just sort of reflect on what it is that you're commenting on there for the broader group?
We're sort of open to conversations with any customer who calls and tailoring to their very specific and unique circumstances. We're finding that customers have a combination of things going on. So our payment arrangements, whilst we're still entering them into our system, aren't looking like very traditional payment plans. So some have been the delayed start date. But they still might be on an instalment plan, but it might not start for 6 weeks to 3 months. So there are very different options sort of out there. The biggest request from businesses that we found initially was, are you going to remove all of our charges? So that was the biggest request we got initially, which as a business we are not doing. But we've found that as long as they were open for an open discussion, that we could find a solution that would get there. But I just wonder if the same solution will still be appropriate for them, again, like Jess was saying, in another month's time.
Yeah, okay, that's good to know. Okay, so I'll touch on, as I said, there'll be opportunity for us to speak more and raise and come back to the comments there. I guess what I'd like to, so thank you for everyone who shared those comments and questions. From here, I'd just like to take the opportunity to speak in a bit more detail about the broader reform of the code work that we commenced last year and that we've put on hold. So many of you will recall some discussion, and we've met at sort of a range of different areas, that during 2019 we did commence a very broad review of the water customer service codes. We had a project launch in August. We saw many familiar faces there. We heard from representatives about the needs of older Australians, about the needs of culturally and linguistically diverse customers, and also about those with cognitive disabilities. What we did at that time was we followed up with a series of monthly working groups meetings. We met 4 times during late in 2019, and we were able to work with that group to develop and refine our ideas and our approach. And by January, we were reasonably close to preparing a draft of what a new reformed code might look like. We met again with the working group to test some ideas. And while we haven't seen a signer at the moment, Kat George has been very instrumental in that work and bringing that working group together and updating our website. So all the minutes and the agenda for each of those working group meetings are on our website. At that point, in January, I think events started overtaking us. We were checking in with members of our working group about the effects of the bushfire, and obviously sort of history lets us know what happened at that point. So we put the review on hold at that time. Around about March, we made that decision. We were mindful that we'd embarked on a very collaborative process in reforming the code, and we knew it would be difficult to maintain that level of collaboration given the changes thrust on so many organisations, ourselves included. We knew that people we needed to hear from were those in the businesses most focused on supporting the needs of customers. And we also, it was true at the time, and I think it's still true in some respects now, that we still don't know what will emerge on the other side. So we recognise that the drivers for reforming the code are still there. It's just a matter of identifying the best time for us to resume that. We think that there's probably still a bit more to learn and understand about emerging better practice under the current environment in coronavirus, in particular, in the area of small business and debt collection practices. So we'd started reviewing that and considering how those particular areas might be part of a reformed code. But I think, it's true to say that everyone's thinking has been evolving hugely in the last 3 to 4 months, and will continue to do so. We recognise the vital role that everybody plays in getting policy settings right for the customer service codes. So we will want to resume at a time that supports full participation. We also recognise that, I guess we'd all like to have a bit of a clearer picture around the scale and scope of the effects of the coronavirus. So to this end, I do have some questions for you all, and we will be circulating this as part of the SurveyMonkey post-event evaluation. So I'm just going to bring up some slides to share with you all. And what have I got? My share function. There we go. So one of the things we are intending to hold monthly is some better practice workshops monthly. Now, these are the ones that Marcus referred to. It's a bit of an opportunity for us to learn and understand and hear from the sector around changes that are going on in the work practices and about emerging practice. Our intention is to hold these monthly across September, October and November. And Marcus has described a format that we think would work. So one of the survey questions is that we are interested in your comments or feedback on the approach we've outlined there. It's a comments box, so if you think there are changes to that timing or changes in a way that you'd like to see that run, please add your comments there, and we're likely to give you, if you can identify yourself, we're likely to give you a call back and just flesh those out in a little bit more detail. We would like to know, I guess, how the best way to engage with the sector on the longer term reforms of the code. There's a couple of different options. We could resume the working group. We had about 12 members, including EWOV, and we had also representative from DELP, and we were able to hear from some community sector organisations who came and spoke and met with the group because unable to resource a consistent participant in each of those workshops. But we found that that was a really good approach. We could broaden the group, we could start a new group, and we could try something else. So again, there's a question around that. If you've got any comments or thoughts, we'd be really pleased to hear it. And I think sort of the next thing that what you've heard from the full discussion today, and specifically what we've talked about, is that we're really unlikely now to be resuming consultation on the reform of the codes until early 2021. So, and potentially with moving towards the draft decision somewhere in the region of 2021. So while we would have liked to have been able to progress this work program, the reasons that I've stated above are why we're pushing this out. So I guess we're interested in your feedback on the timing of that and the team's ability to participate in that type of arrangement. So as I said, you'll see that in the post-event evaluation. Can I take any questions, or is there anything people would like to reach out to me about that in the context of today? And again, looking for any comments, and then I will pass to you. Okay, so Nicole, maybe if you could let me know what your reflections were of, you've mentioned that in the chat, but perhaps you could have a bit of a, as one of the workshop members, working group members, perhaps you could.
Yes, I thought the working groups were really good. The pace was fantastic. I think the mix was fantastic. And I think the things that we got out of it was really good too. And so I'm happy to continue in any way if you see fit. I think I am concerned, as I was before, as you know, about personal contact visits. And I think now with the coronavirus overlay, that's something that needs to be re-looked at, and how will the customers feel about us going to their property if there's not a vaccine in place and things. So I think the discussions would be great to continue, but how can you, what's the overlay of the COVID, I suppose, is being my thoughts. And we used the findings from the vulnerable workshop at the State Library that day for our bill refresh. That was wonderful.
Oh, great. That is great to hear, and we were able to draw on some of the resources that Colaban were bringing to the work. I think there'd also been some work, Hannah, with Melbourne Equity Institute and Scope against yourselves on some of the work you've done with customers with cognitive disabilities. Debbie, you're also part of the group, but I'm not happy to hear from you, but I guess I'd invite other people who weren't able to participate, or, I mean, we did specifically leave it to 12 members. We thought that was a good group that we could work with, a reasonably agile group. We did think it would be a 6-month program. Obviously, things are a little bit different now. So I guess there's that comment to make. And just before I pass to you, Debbie, Nicole absolutely recognised that the world's changed, and things like that personal contact will definitely need to step through. There's it's a much more complex environment now that we're operating in, and that may go for some time. So, and people's views and preferences may have changed as a result of coronavirus. Debbie, are you able to got any comments to share?
Thanks, Lucy. Just agree with Nicole. Being part of the working group was really beneficial, and I think what that did was prompted a lot of discussion and innovative thinking about not only about what was going to happen in the next little while, but into the future, along with the way we work digitally with our customers. So I think yes, we've got to apply the COVID overlay over how we operate, but we've got some great tools that allow us to continue doing what we're currently doing. So this forum today is a good example. So I think with some careful planning, we can continue along that way, and it shouldn't impede our progress on that area, on the code work that we're doing.
Okay, that's great to hear that feedback, Debbie. It's good to sort of check in. It's been a little while since we all met, and to have those reflections is helpful. Hannah, you've got some observations there. I'm happy. Now's a good time for you to share them if you'd like.
Only that we've still been, we've made an attempt to go out to people's properties to offer support options. So we're not knocking on doors, but we're leaving cards in mailboxes, and we're just trying to get as creative as possible, fully well understanding that we're not in stage 4, but that we're trying to be creative about the ways we engage with customers and see how that goes. So we haven't done a full retrospective on the customer contact back from that, but hopefully we'll have that to share soon.
Thanks, Hannah. That's excellent feedback, and certainly they're the things that we want to accommodate in a new and reformed code. In some strange way, it's just really, unfortunately, a really good opportunity to look through where we got up to, but look at it again with fresh eyes around what's possible now that the environment's changed a lot. So I am mindful that, again, there was more interest in the working group than what we thought we could maintain with 12 people, but we are absolutely open to revisiting that, given that the environment broadly has changed. So please do use that survey to provide your views and thoughts about that. Okay, so
Lucy, sorry, Grace here from Yarra Valley Water. Just one, I think, and I might be mistaken, but I think we had, because of the range of topics being covered with within the code, we had sort of tended to send some different people along at different stages, and I'm not sure. I think we'd need to just reflect internally whether that was the best option, but we're sort of more subject matter experts. So I guess just in terms of the focus of those September, October, November workshops, and I'm sorry, apologies, I missed probably the guts of the session in the first 20 minutes. So you probably answered it all in the bit that I missed. So I'm really apologies for that. But just in terms of the focus of those sessions, will help us obviously identify, who's best to attend.
Okay, great. So what I would like to also, I think we've generally covered most of the questions. if you feel today that some of those items haven't really been addressed in a way, or they spark different thoughts, absolutely reach out to the water team. Any of us will be happy to assist you. I confirm that we'll be sending around the Survey Monkey, so please do take the time to. It's generally about the event and the experience for you, but also we'll have these questions around the next stages of the reform program. Darren, you've made a request just to have some high-level slides around the event today. I'm more than happy to do that, as well as a recording for people who weren't able to participate, so we'll send that through as well. But yeah, happy to take further requests if need be. Marcus, what I will do now is just to pass to Marcus and Kate for some final reflections on the day that's been. But on behalf of myself, thank you all for joining today. We look forward to seeing you again soon.
Yeah, just before I wrap up, I was wondering if Simon, if you're watching, Simon, when we put this through our energy amendments, we did put an obligation around energy retailers assisting customers putting in ERGS applications. Now, obviously, that's beyond the scope of national principles, but it's something that was a practical thing in energy. And I'm just, Simon, do you have any comments or any questions you might have for the industry about how they're going about assistance with ERGS, or whether it's something we should be pushing as best practice?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, from my understanding from the data we've been collecting, Marcus, there's been a big increase in the ERGS applications, but it's been concentrated in some retailers and not others. And we don't know whether that's because there's less demand for ERGS for some retailers. I think it's like the metro, less demand for ERGS in the regions, and we're not quite sure exactly what's happening there. So certainly be interested in understanding whether or not across the industry they're seeing more demand for help completing those ERGS, and whether that's making a difference.
Was there anyone from any of the water businesses that might want to reflect on your practices with ERGS and how you're going about it? And also whether you're experiencing any difficulties with the length of time for applications?
ERGS is certainly, Marcus and Nicole, ERGS is certainly improved from the status that it was a few months back, and we're really grateful for that because it's such an important tool for us. We will assist customers as they need, and always have that engagement with them to see if they need that support, and follow up with customers as well, because the forms are hard. Like if you have low literacy or you're just really stressed, it's a complex form to have to complete. And that would be a nice thing, I think, even as part of the discussions moving forward, Lucy, if those sorts of things could be made easier for customers to self-serve.
So it's Carol here from East Gippsland. We're the same. We've been assisting customers with the forms for a long time. What we used to do was take photocopies, and they would then take that photocopy and complete a form for the electricity and gas, so that they had all the information already. So we've been doing that for many, many years. We still push ERGS, and everything obviously now is via phone, and our numbers have skyrocketed in relation to ERGS applications.
That's good to know.
The only other one, and probably on Nicole's point about field visits and the code, on the other flip side, something that's come up in energy and wasn't our codes, was self-meter reading. So it's becoming a more significant issue in gas. But again, is anyone looking at things like self-meter reading as one of those measures to reduce field staff's outer interactions on not entering properties?
So again, Carol from East Gippsland, we've taken tenant readings either from owner agent or tenant owner agent for a long time too. It saves them, we have a meter reading cost, so it saves them that cost as well. But yeah, and it also saves the field staff going and visiting.
Thanks for that.
Can I ask another question too, Marcus? Knock on
yes.
One from the ERGS. I have heard anecdotally from the team that water businesses are very proactive in helping those ERGS application forms be submitted. Any reflections? I'd just be interested in from the water businesses about what that means for your staff in terms of time burden, or what that means for your business? Is it something that when you reach out and try and help a customer to fill those in and get them submitted as easy as possible, what does that really mean for your business internally? Any reflections? Be really interested to hear.
So for us, for again, eSkipsland, our debt collection person does it. She does all of that. It's built into that position that we have at the moment.
For our staff, it's actually a mental wellbeing thing, because they feel that they can do something useful and practical for a customer that's of a significant financial value. So it means, we call it hamburger with with customers, are they getting a leak allowance, ERGs, concessions, all the things that you can offer them. And if the ERGs process is working smoothly and that has the operational rhythm to it, it's really good, because they go home feeling that they've done their best.
That's a really positive perspective on ERGs applications, Nicole. Thank you for sharing that. So I'll absolutely keep that one in mind when I hear, other sort of reflections on how hard it can be at times. But that is absolutely wonderful to hear, and great to hear, Carol, your business too being proactive through your debt collection officer. Thank you for sharing.
Can I just share, with assisting customers to complete the utility relief grant, it's about 10 to 15 minutes extra per an application by the time you run through the form, play the consent script to the customer. And we had, due to time constraints, we had cut back on that a little bit. We had noticed that the number of cancelled application increased once we stopped doing this. So we are allocating that time back because it's worth putting in for the successful outcome of the grant.
Thanks very much, Tracy. I've seen Hannah's comment too. 5 to 10 minutes is your estimation to go through it. Doesn't sound like it's overly burdensome. I see a call out for an admin fee to be applied to water businesses for taking on that role. There are departments here listening, so thought I'd just call that one out.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I mean, probably if I wrap up, it probably does raise a good question there, Kate. I know there are a few people from DELP. I'm not sure if anyone from DELP may have any comments to make or reflections on today before we wrap it up.
Marcus, it's Kessia. So I'm the ED, for those that don't know me on the call, I'm the ED of Partnerships and Sector Performance in DELP. So apologies to some bandwidth issues I think happening across the board. Not sure if everybody's kids have just started streaming like mine, and maybe that's why we're having a few issues. So yeah, really good to hear all the perspectives. We know how much work all of the water corporations have been doing, and all of the assistance that they've been and outreach services they've been providing into communities. So really good to hear some of those good examples coming through for people to share. I think that, the one thing that I do hear from the MDs a lot and from the water corporations is how much each of the water corps really try to target their programs depending on their communities. So, what works in Metro Melbourne for City West Water and South East Water and Yarra Valley definitely doesn't work in Bairnsdale or Hamilton or Horsham. So, different things are needed for different communities. And I think that's one of the real benefits of water corporations being able to make sure that they can target that hardship and payment opportunities and plans for whatever the customer's needs are. I think that's a real strength that we're hearing across the water sector. So yeah, thank you. And just echo that the reporting is really, really important to happen on a weekly basis. That's, as both Marcus and Kate were saying, that's really important for them, but it's also really important for Treasury and DELP to be able to make sure that we're all working off the same baseline data. So thanks very much, everybody, for your help on that.
Brilliant. Thanks for that, Kessia. And just, again, note to everybody that, ourselves, DELP, Treasury, as well as our roles in other sectors, we're all working together on this. So I know if you think we're tripping over each other or making multiple requests, let us know, but we are trying to exchange information and time our work and all that, so it's complementary rather than hindering you. But we are, I guess, all in this together, so we want to work cooperatively, I guess, while we're in this stage, but also next year as we move towards the recovery phase as well. So there will need to be continuing ongoing work and coordination, and we're keen to keep working with yourselves, but also working across government. But sing out if you think we're all asking for the same thing in different forms, or if you think we could better coordinate, let us know. But just some reflections on today. I think there is, leading into that, interest in seeing results from the data we're collecting. And I know it's often a frustration. You see the data and don't see the outcomes or how you're doing relatively to others. So we'll be moving towards getting some information out there. We do note the concerns about age debt, and that will certainly be something we'll be monitoring as we head towards the next set of price reviews. We'll note Gavin's concern around the liens, and we'll keep a lookout to see whether it does emerge as a problem. In terms of the customer charter, we're quite satisfied that you don't need to physically update or mail out your charters, but it'll be handy if you link back into the national principles on your website there. We recognise businesses are offering different forms of payment assistance, so there might be some things that are falling between the instalment plan data we're getting and some of the more tailored approaches you've developed during this period. So we'll see if we need to change any of our monitoring through that. There seems to be a continued interest in re-establishing some working groups around the customer service code. So Lucy and her team will look in that. And again, I think we're seeing perhaps the application of ERGs. It's very good to hear that the processes and timelines are improving. We would certainly endorse businesses working with customers to assist in filling out as probably best practice. And if it's not something you're routinely doing in your business, perhaps that's a business improvement measure you could suggest internally to assist people. So I really thank everyone for being here today. It's been very useful to assist our understanding, and I'll hand back over to Kate for any closeouts and next steps.
Great, thanks very much, Marcus. Just wanted to thank everyone too for your attendance and valuable to hear during this, and pleasing to hear, I guess, the in which water businesses are assisting their customers at this time. It was great to hear about the tailoring of assistance to customers' circumstances, and the way in which you're applying payment extensions as well as payment plans in creative ways with customers during this time as well. Perspective on ERGs applications, so that's great. As Lucy and Marcus flagged, I think in the coming months we'll commence the first in a series of better practice workshops. So Lucy will send out that survey she mentioned. I think that's right, Lucy, just to get your feedback on what that might look like and the timing. So thanks in advance for your participation in those workshops to continue to engage with us. And we're very aware of the competing priorities for your businesses at this time. So we'll aim to make that time commitment as effective and efficient as possible. And please reach out to the team if you've got other concerns or suggestions about how we can work with you and engage further. Hopefully I'll have that roundtable too with our commissioners, with managing directors of your water businesses in due course too. So I'll reach out shortly on that basis. And commissions months, and indeed in the medium to longer term as we enter the recovery phase. Lucy, I'm not sure if there's anything else in terms of next steps. Hopefully I've given one anyway, but thanks for your attendance today, and in the meanwhile please take care and we'll see you. Thanks everyone.
Thanks, Kate. Bye everyone.